You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of absolute precision. It's almost like engineering.
Right, it's very clinical.
Yeah, exactly. You break your arm, you go to the hospital, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points at it and says, you know, there it is, that is the problem.
It is entirely binary. It's visible, it's clear-cut, broken or not broken.
Right. It's a clean diagnostic process. But then you step into the world of human civilization. You look at macroeconomics, or you look at societal collapse, the rise and fall of massive empires, and suddenly that x-ray machine seems completely broken.
It really does. The picture gets incredibly messy.
It's just murky. We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, well, it's just incredibly difficult to read. We see global powers fall, we see massive economies crumble into dust, and everyone points the finger at something entirely different.
Yes, the explanations are always all over the place.
Like, one historian says it was military overreach, right? But then an economist steps in and says, no, it was inflation. And then a sociologist blames cultural decay.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. But, what if there actually is an X-ray?
Oh, right.
What if there is a rigid, decipherable set of diagnostic criteria for why societies either thrive or ultimately implode?
And that is exactly what we're getting into today. We are looking at the exact macro-level blueprints of civilization collapse. Today, for this deep dive, we are opening up a remarkably dense and honestly just fascinating source.
It really is a heavy hitter.
It is. It's lecture 417 of the Tolu Islam series. We are diving into a highly detailed commentary on Surah Bani Israel, that is Surah 17 of the Quran, and we are specifically zooming in on Ayat 16 through 22 today.
And just to set the stage for you, our listener, I want to make something very clear right off the bat.
Yeah.
Do not approach this merely as a traditional theological text.
Wait, this isn't just about theology.
Not at all. Our mission for this deep dive is to look at this through the lens of what the source actually calls social physics. The material we are analyzing today treats this text as a literal masterclass in the economic and psychological drivers of societal collapse.
Which is such a wild way to look at it.
It is. It outlines exactly how civilizations rise, how they stagnate, and the precise mechanical reasons they eventually crush themselves under the weight of their own systems.
Okay, let's unpack this because, reading through these notes, I was genuinely caught off guard by how startlingly modern this critique is.
It feels very contemporary.
It really does. It doesn't read like ancient history at all. It reads like a razor-sharp analysis of, modern hypercapitalism, systemic exploitation, and the catastrophic dangers of short-term economic planning.
What is crucial here is how the source deliberately challenges the traditional, often fatalistic translations of these verses.
Right. The traditional views can be very different.
Completely different. In standard traditional readings, people sometimes walk away thinking the rise and fall of a nation is just random divine whim. Like lightning strikes one city, an earthquake swallows another, and it's all just a mysterious, arbitrary punishment from the sky.
Just completely out of nowhere.
Exactly. But this text argues the exact opposite. It argues that the mechanics of civilization operate as a rigid set of physical and social sciences, a literal law of nature, action and reaction.
So basically, no arbitrary lightning bolts, just cause, effect, and momentum. Let's jump right into the hook here, which the text bases on Ayat 16. I have been calling this the luxury trap in my notes.
That's a very fitting title for it.
Right. The verse basically says that when a nation faces destruction, the rot specifically starts at the top with a group called the Mutrafin.
The Mutrafin, yes.
And these are like the pampered elites, the luxurious class that holds all the power.
Yes, but we have to be extremely precise about what this means because the text makes a vital distinction here. Wealth itself is actually not the problem.
Oh, wait, really? So just being rich isn't the issue?
No, not at all. The presence of abundant resources, advanced technology, or having a high standard of living, all of those things are actually viewed as positive achievements in this framework.
Okay, so then what is the trap?
The issue is the specific character of the people holding the power. And even more importantly, the exploitative economic system they engineer to maintain that luxury.
Right. So it is not just, having a lot of money is bad. It is about how that money is generated and how it is concentrated.
Exactly. The Mutrafin are defined in this commentary as those who live luxuriously entirely off the labor of others. It is systemic extraction. And this is where the text introduces the underlying economic disease that fuels this luxury trap.
And that disease is the concept of riba, right?
Yes, riba.
Now, I mean, most people hear the word riba and they immediately think, oh, that means interest on a bank loan. But the source is taking a much wider, like, macroeconomic view of it, isn't it?
Far wider. In the context of this social physics, riba represents any system of usury or exploitation where wealth is continuously extracted without the input of proportional labor or productive value.
So it's basically passive extraction.
Yes, it is the hoarding of capital to passively drain the working class. The Mutrafin are not the ones out there plowing the fields. They aren't building the aqueducts or, designing the technology.
Right, they aren't doing the actual work.
No, they are the ones who control the capital. And they use that capital to extract the value generated by everyone else.
So when wealth becomes overabundant but hyper-concentrated in the hands of a few people who aren't doing the physical or intellectual labor, a massive psychological shift happens.
It completely alters the mindset of the society.
Yeah, the elites just lose their work ethic entirely. They become entirely insulated from the realities of production. And according to the text, this sense of unearned entitlement, it sort of trickles down and affects the entire society.
It fundamentally warps the national character. Because when the working class sees that hard work doesn't actually lead to prosperity, but rather that financial manipulation and proximity to power is the only way to survive, the society just turns away from productive striving.
Wow, so the whole motivation just collapses.
Exactly. They turn to begging, whether literally begging in the streets or economically, through a system that relies on handouts and corrupt patronage rather than actual innovation. That is exactly how the rot sets in.
Let's ground this for a second. The source uses the fall of the Roman Empire as a prime historical example. And, I mean, if you look at the mechanics of Rome, it maps perfectly to this.
It is a textbook case of the luxury trap.
Right. You look at the early Roman Republic, and it was built on this ideal of the citizen farmer. The people fighting the wars were the exact same people working the land.
They had skin in the game.
Exactly. But as Rome expanded, the elite class, the Roman Mutrafin, basically, they started hoarding all the wealth from the conquered territories. They bought up all the land, created these massive slave-driven agricultural estates called latifundia, and essentially put the average Roman citizen completely out of work.
Because the everyday Roman just couldn't compete with free slave labor.
Yeah, it's impossible. So the elite extracted all the wealth, the middle class just completely evaporated, and Rome had to introduce the whole bread and circuses thing just to keep the starving, unemployed masses from revolting.
And that right there is the exact societal begging the text describes.
But wait, let me push back on this, or at least voice a question I know you, the listener, are probably asking right now. Even if the Roman elites were super exploitative, how does the actual destruction happen?
That is the big question.
Right, because the traditional translation of this verse implies that God just looks down, sees the rich behaving badly, and decides to smite them. Like, we command them, they disobey, so we destroy them. How does that fit with this idea of a law of nature?
That is the pivotal question. And it is where the linguistic analysis of this source material totally transforms the text.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
The source points out a massive flaw in how that specific verse is traditionally translated. The word used in Arabic is amarna. Now, the traditional fatalistic reading says, "We commanded the elites."
Like a verbal order.
Right. But the source argues that in the pure vocabulary of the ancient Arabs, the root meaning of amarna isn't just a verbal command or an order. It implies momentum.
Momentum. I mean, when I read that in the notes, it completely rewired how I understood the entire concept of societal collapse.
It changes the entire physics of the verse. It means the society isn't just instantly zapped by a divine laser beam. It means they are warned, perhaps by reformers, or by the glaringly obvious economic indicators starting to flash red. But instead of stopping, the elites double down.
They just keep going.
They pour more fuel onto the fire of their exploitive systems. Amarna describes the gathering of an unstoppable internal force.
The source uses this brilliant, terrifying analogy for this. It says, compare this societal momentum to a giant boulder resting at the absolute top of a steep hill.
Yes, the boulder analogy is perfect.
Right, so to get it moving initially, you have to apply some external force. The elites make that initial choice to institute an exploitative system. They give the boulder a push. But once that boulder starts rolling down the hill, the physics completely change.
It no longer needs you to push it. It gathers its own internal force, its own impetus. It gets faster and heavier the further it goes.
And more importantly, you can no longer stop it. The elites who started the system eventually lose control of it completely.
This is the exact physics of societal collapse. They reach an event horizon. a point of no return.
Wow.
The societal momentum of hoarding, of riba, of ignoring the infrastructure in the working class, it becomes so structurally embedded and so destructive that the society is helpless to halt it. They're just standing at the bottom of the hill, watching the boulder they pushed crush everything in its path.
The source also points to the decline of the British Empire post-World War II as another example of this.
Yeah, it's a very modern example.
Yeah, I mean, the British spent centuries building an extractive colonial model, essentially acting as the global Mutrafine. They extracted raw materials from places like India, manufactured them, and sold them back.
But that system required an ever-expanding military and administrative apparatus to maintain.
Exactly. And once the momentum of that overextension took hold, combined with, the catastrophic debt of 2 world wars, the collapse of their global hegemony wasn't a sudden surprise. It was just the inescapable math of the momentum they created.
And the tragic part is, the people inside a collapsing system often feel completely bewildered by it.
They don't see it coming.
No, they look at the hyperinflation, the crumbling infrastructure, the social unrest, and they say, how did this happen so fast? Why is God doing this to us?
Right.
But it wasn't fast. It wasn't arbitrary. It was the undeniable mathematical result of the momentum they themselves initiated.
Which brings us to a massive logical transition here. Because if a society's collapse is a natural consequence of its momentum, how exactly do those consequences attach themselves to our actions?
A great question. How does the cause link to the effect?
Yeah, we talk about it in the abstract, like, oh, society implemented an extractive tax system, so eventually a bad thing happens. But the text gets incredibly granular about the actual physics of cause and effect.
It does, and to explain it, the source introduces a concept that is universally misunderstood in standard theological circles, and that is the concept of Zambi.
Right, Zambi, because if you open almost any standard translation of this text, Zambi is universally translated as sin.
Yes, a moral failing.
Like a mystical black mark that an angel writes down in a ledger, just waiting to be read back to you at the end of time.
But the source provides a fascinating linguistic deconstruction of this word. In the pure ancient Arabic vocabulary, the language of the desert nomads who first heard this, the root meaning of Zambi is not an abstract mystical thing. It quite literally means a tail.
Wait, a tail? Like on an animal?
Specifically, an animal's tail that is firmly, permanently attached to its body and follows it absolutely everywhere it goes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the source takes this literal meaning, the tail, and uses it to explain the exact physics of consequence.
It's such a grounded way to look at it.
It is. It is arguing that a destructive action, like an elite class hoarding wealth or a corporation prioritizing quarterly profits over safety, isn't just a bad deed floating out in the ether somewhere.
No, it has mass. It has reality.
It has a material consequence permanently glued to it, trailing right behind it, exactly like a tail.
It is a stunning visual metaphor for the inescapable nature of reality. You cannot separate the horse from its tail, and you cannot separate the exploitative action from its inevitable consequence.
You take the action, you grow the tail.
Period. You walk forward, the tail follows.
But the tragedy of the human condition, which the text highlights so brilliantly, is our willful blindness to this physics. We only look forward. We only ever see today.
We see the immediate action.
Yeah, we see the profit margins going up. We see the stock price surge. We see the shiny new luxury good in the store. We see the animal's head. But we completely refuse to look backwards at the tomorrow, the tail of consequence that is dragging along the ground right behind us.
This is a perfect moment to connect this to you, the listener. Think about the systems you interact with every single day. What are the tails trailing our modern habits?
That's a huge question.
Think about the invisible consequences firmly attached to the convenience of our global supply chains.
Oh, this is the perfect modern analogy. Think about fast fashion or buying the latest smartphone with next-day delivery. We see the front of the animal, the cheap, stylish product arriving at our doorstep. It feels like a win.
But we refuse to look at the tail.
Exactly. The tail is the cobalt mined under horrific conditions in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yes.
The tail is the massive carbon footprint of the container ships bringing it across the ocean. The tail is the microplastics shedding into the water supply. We pretend those things aren't attached to the click-to-buy button on our screens.
But the social physics of Zambi says they are permanently glued together. You cannot have the hyper-cheap consumer good without the environmental and labor degradation trailing right behind it into tomorrow.
They are one and the same organism.
And eventually, the tail catches up to you. The environmental degradation forces climate migrations, which destabilize global politics, which ultimately destroys the very economy that allowed you to buy the cheap phone in the first place. The tail is inescapable.
It's actually haunting when you visualize it that way. We are a civilization dragging a massive, heavy tail of consequences, completely ignoring it until it finally trips us up.
And this blindness perfectly sets up the fundamental psychological flaw the text addresses next.
Right, because why do we ignore the tail? It is our absolute obsession with the immediate present.
Yes. As we move into the structural analysis of Ayat 18 and 19, the text contrasts two distinct mindsets that govern human behavior.
Yeah.
And those are Ajila and Akhira.
Let's clearly define those for the listener, because everything hinges on these two
Let's
words.
do it.
Ajila translates roughly to immediate short-term gain. It is the quick buck. Instant gratification. In business terms, it is quarter-by-quarter thinking.
It is entirely focused on the now.
Right. And then Al-Akhira, on the other hand, is the ultimate future, the sustainable vision. It's the long game that stretches way beyond our immediate lifetime.
And based entirely on how people orient themselves toward these two concepts, the source divides all of humanity and all socioeconomic systems, really into three distinct categories.
Honestly, this is one of the most profound and practical socioeconomic models I have seen extracted from any ancient text.
It is incredibly applicable today.
So let's lay out the three categories. I want to look at this blueprint in detail.
Okay, category one, the short-termers.
The short-termers.
Yes, these are the societies, the corporations, or the individuals who master the natural physical laws. They understand science, they master agriculture, economics, and engineering. They harness these laws brilliantly to gain immediate wealth and power. They completely conquer Al-Ajila. But they completely ignore permanent moral values. They exploit labor, they strip mine the earth, they deceive the public.
So they get the immediate reward.
They succeed materially in the short term, yes. But because they have no ethical foundation, they guarantee their own future ruin. They are the ones who build the beautiful head, but ignore the poisonous tail.
Let's use a modern corporate example to make this crystal clear, because it happens literally all the time. Look at the recent history of certain major aerospace companies, like Boeing, for example.
Oh, that is a perfect example of category one.
Right, because for decades, they were engineering marvels.
Right.
But eventually, the leadership shifted from engineers to financiers. The C-suite prioritized Al-Ajila, immediate stock buybacks, pumping up the share price for the next quarter.
The immediate short-term gain at any cost.
Exactly. To do that, they cut corners on safety, they outsourced critical software, and they silenced whistleblowers. They got the gold today. The stock soared initially.
But they completely ignored the tail.
And the tail was catastrophic system failures, grounded fleets, lost lives, and just a shattered global reputation. They mastered the physics of flight, but their moral bankruptcy in the boardroom destroyed their future.
That is the perfect manifestation of category one. Now, contrast that with category two, the sustainable visionaries.
Yeah, who are they?
These are the people who also master physical laws. They are the scientists, the builders, the innovators. But crucially, they utilize the wealth and power they generate according to permanent, divine, moral values. They balance the equation.
So they are looking at both sides.
Exactly. By striving for Al-Akhira, the sustainable, equitable future, they secure a prosperous present and a brilliant, lasting future.
They get the gold today, but they use it to plant orchards they might never even live to eat from. They respect the tail.
I love that phrasing. Yes,
Okay.
they respect the tail. They engineer the economy so that the tail trailing behind them is one of infrastructure, education, and ecological balance, rather than debt and extraction.
And then we have category 3, the fatalists.
Ah, yes. The fatalists.
This is my absolute favorite part of the source material. It is so utterly blunt and uncompromising.
The fatalists are those who ignore physical laws entirely. They don't study science, they don't innovate, they don't engage in the messy reality of economics or agriculture.
To check out.
Yes.
Yeah.
They just sit back and expect God to hand them wealth, security, and success purely because they perform religious rituals and consider themselves pious.
The host of the original lecture zeroes in on this with such incredible sharpness. He focuses on the Arabic word sa'i, which means striving or intellectual and physical effort. And he points out the sheer delusion of the fatalist mindset.
It is a very direct critique.
It is. The source notes hilariously but accurately that a person can sit on a beautifully woven prayer mat all day long, rolling their prayer beads, chanting Allah, Allah from dawn until dusk, and they will not grow a single grain of wheat.
Not one.
The universe does not care about your prayer mat if you refuse to put a shovel in the dirt.
The physical laws are immovable. They don't bend for rituals.
Right. Meanwhile, a non-believer, someone who perhaps entirely rejects the concept of God or religion, but who actually goes out into the fields, studies the nitrogen cycle, understands soil pH, and plants the seeds with intense labor.
They get the harvest.
Yes. The physical laws of nature will reward that person with 700 grains for every single seed planted. The earth yields its bounty to the one who strives, who does the say, completely regardless of their theology.
What is deeply fascinating here is the paradigm shift the text demands. It argues that ignoring the physical laws of nature is in itself a fundamental crime.
A crime.
Yes, because expecting the universe to break its own strict rules and suspend the laws of physics to reward you just because you think you are holy, while you actively live off the charity and hard work of others. The text views that as a massive psychological delusion. It is a form of profound arrogance.
It's basically asking the universe to enable your laziness. You're demanding that God act as your personal servant because you learned how to recite some words.
Exactly. The laws of nature are the laws of God.
Yeah.
To ignore them is to fail in this reality.
But wait, if we accept that the non-believer who studies the soil gets the wheat, and the corrupt corporation that studies aerodynamics gets the airplane, this raises a massive fundamental philosophical problem.
It does. It brings up the classic dilemma.
And I know you, the listener, are probably shouting this at your screen right now. If this whole system is ultimately governed by a just entity, why on earth does the universe allow the Category 1 people, the corrupt, short-term thinkers, the exploitative elites, to get so incredibly powerful in the first place?
Why do the bad guys get the power?
Right. If God is building a moral universe, why do the tyrants get the oil, the rare earth metals, and the nuclear codes?
It is the oldest, most agonizing question in human history. Why do the wicked prosper? And the brilliance of this text is that it addresses this head-on in Ayat 20. It doesn't dodge the question at all.
It gives an actual answer.
It provides an ultimate rationalist proof. The text introduces the concept of Rububiyyah, which translates to universal nourishment or unrestricted gifts.
Unrestricted.
Yes. The verse explicitly declares that God's gifts in the physical universe are absolutely, categorically unrestricted. He extends the laws of nature to everyone, the righteous and the corrupt alike.
Okay, devil's advocate here for a second, but shouldn't God put a gatekeeper on those resources? I mean, if I am designing a moral system, I am putting a biometric lock on the fertile soil and the uranium deposits so that only the quote-unquote good people can access them. Why not just starve the tyrants?
The text provides a breathtaking counter-argument to that exact impulse. It uses the biological analogy of a child in the womb to explain Rububiyyah.
I loved this part. Let's really look at the womb analogy.
Think about the mechanics of human development. Long before a baby is born, long before it has any conception of a religion, a nationality, a political ideology, or a moral compass. The universe has already anticipated its needs and prepared for it.
Right, before it even has a thought.
Exactly. The mother's body provides nourishment. The earth has oxygen waiting for lungs that are still forming in fluid. The sun is producing heat millions of miles away to warm a body that hasn't even taken a breath.
It's all just there, waiting.
The physical laws of the universe do not discriminate. The sun doesn't check your moral resume before it warms your face. Gravity keeps the saint and the tyrant anchored to the earth with the exact same mathematical force.
So God isn't just a creator, but a provider, a razak. And the strict definition of providing means providing for everyone, universally.
Yes. The text argues that putting a moral gatekeeper on natural laws would actually be the ultimate form of tyranny. It would violate the very definition of universal nourishment.
Wow, that's a wild thought.
Imagine if gravity just stopped working for you because you lied that morning. Or if your crops withered instantly because you were greedy. It would be chaos, not a structured universe.
You couldn't even function.
God's physical laws are an absolute level playing field. If you study agriculture, you will grow crops. If you study physics, you can split the atom. Anyone, regardless of their ethics, can master the natural sciences to gain physical power and wealth.
The universe is basically saying, here are the tools. They are laid out on the workbench. I will not hide them from you.
Exactly. However, the catch, and in social physics there is always a catch, is that While anyone can gain power using natural laws, only those with mu'min can actually sustain it.
And how does the text define mu'min here?
It brilliantly translates it not just as belief, but as deep conviction in permanent ethical values.
Oh.
Only those with that conviction can sustain that physical power without ultimately destroying themselves.
Oh, wow. So the short-termers, the exploitative Mutrafine, they can build the massive skyscraper because they understand load-bearing engineering and physics.
They have the tools.
But because they inevitably exploit the workers to build it and cheat the suppliers, the society eventually revolts and burns the skyscraper down.
Precisely. They possess the science to build the structure, but they entirely lack the ethical framework required to sustain the civilization living inside it.
Think about what this means for you and me right now. Think about the stakes of the modern era. We look at artificial intelligence, CRISPR genetic engineering, nuclear fusion.
Immensely powerful tools.
These are the underlying natural laws we have finally unlocked. And the technology itself is entirely ruthlessly neutral. The universe handed us the keys to the genetic code without a moral gatekeeper.
The gifts are unrestricted.
Exactly. So the differentiator, the sole variable that decides if humanity survives the next 200 years, is the ethical framework we choose to apply to these neutral tools. Will we use AI for Ajila short-term exploitation, mass surveillance, and maximizing click-through rates? Or will we use it for Akhira sustainable human flourishing, curing disease, and optimizing resource distribution?
It is entirely up to us. The unrestricted gifts are given. The responsibility of the tail is ours alone.
Which naturally leads us to a massive reevaluation of success because, if anyone can gain wealth by mastering physics, and wealth isn't a sign of divine favor, then how does this framework define ultimate success?
We have to measure it differently.
Yeah, if I can't look at a billionaire's bank account and say, look, God clearly loves them, what is the actual tangible metric for who is truly preferred in the eyes of this social physics?
That takes us directly into the systemic analysis of Ayat 21. The verse states, "Look how we have preferred some over others. Fadalna badahum ala ba." And it introduces the concept of degrees or darajat of greatness, akbar.
Now, I have to be honest, a surface-level reading of preferred some over others immediately sounds like a caste system.
It does, yes.
It sounds like God is just arbitrarily picking favorites, picking winners and losers before the race even starts.
But once again, the source violently tears down that fatalistic traditional reading. The preference mentioned here is not a mystical divine bias. It is a strict mathematical meritocracy.
It's earned.
It is social physics in action. Nations that utilize immense intellectual effort, that obsessively study the universe, that align themselves with the physical laws of nature, they will naturally rise above those that sit on prayer mats expecting miracles.
The farmers beat the fatalists.
Every time. A nation of engineers will always, mathematically, have preference over a nation of fatalists.
So the preference is earned through sweat, intellect, and the laboratory.
Yes. But the text does something even more radical here. It redefines the very core concept of Akbar, or greatness.
Let's get into this because this is huge.
Throughout human history, we have almost exclusively associated greatness with arrogant, exploitative power. We look at the pharaohs, we look at the monarchs who build colossal monuments on the backs of thousands of slaves.
We look at modern billionaires who hoard unprecedented global resources.
Exactly. Humanity consistently conflates tyranny with greatness.
We literally call Alexander the Great because his military tactics allowed him to conquer and subjugate an enormous amount of people.
Yes, we confuse the ability to destroy with the capacity to elevate. But the text argues that true greatness, the highest degrees, or darajat, isn't tyranny at all.
So what does this all mean? How do you actually achieve this ultimate greatness if it's not just about hoarding the most gold or conquering the most land?
You get material preference by working hard and mastering the neutral laws of nature. That is step one. But you achieve ultimate greatness, the zenith of civilization, only when you take that immense power, harness those natural forces, and then voluntarily choose to distribute the benefits equitably according to permanent divine ethical values.
It's the combination of the two.
It is the perfect, seamless synthesis of scientific brilliance and moral perfection.
You know, there is a point in the source material that absolutely floored me regarding this. Muslims around the world repeat the phrase Allahu Akbar millions of times a day. It translates broadly to God is the greatest. But the host of the original lecture makes this incredible, piercing point about it.
It completely reframes the phrase.
He says that saying Allahu Akbar isn't just supposed to be a hollow, ritualistic phrase you mumble during prayers. It is actually supposed to be a radical political and socioeconomic declaration.
A manifesto, really.
Yes. When you say it, you are making a declaration that true sovereignty and the highest degree of human civilization belongs only to a system that perfectly balances natural science with ethical distribution. You are actively declaring that human exploitation, no matter how materially successful it looks, is not great.
That is a profound, earth-shattering paradigm shift. You are declaring that a society that manages to feed its poorest citizens through advanced sustainable agriculture is fundamentally greater than a globe-spanning empire that builds golden palaces through the blood of slavery.
It's breathtaking when you view it as a political manifesto rather than just a religious chant. But obviously, looking at history, societies rarely, if ever, achieve this balance.
Rarely. We usually fall short.
We almost always mess it up. So what is the ultimate fatal flaw? What is the specific mechanical error that prevents a society from reaching this greatness and instead sends them tumbling down the hill like that boulder we talked about at the beginning?
The fatal flaw, the ultimate error in social physics, is the human attempt to split the universe in half.
Okay, I need you to explain that. How do you split the universe?
We find the diagnostic criteria for this in the final verse of our deep dive today, Ayat 22. The verse says, "Do not set up another deity with God, lest you sit condemned and forsaken."
Now, obviously, the immediate Sunday school thought is idolatry, praying to statues of stone or wood.
That is the standard view, yes.
But keeping with our strict theme of macroeconomics and social physics, I'm guessing setting up another deity means something much more systemic here.
What's fascinating here is the source's uniquely systemic interpretation. It argues that setting up another deity means creating a dual system, a schizophrenia of civilization, basically.
A dual system.
Yes. It happens when a society is perfectly happy to use God's natural physical laws to extract wealth and conquer nature. They use physics to build machines, they use chemistry to refine oil, they use biology to increase crop yields.
They obey the laws to get rich.
They strictly obey the universal laws in the laboratory. But then, the very moment it comes time to decide how to distribute that wealth, how to write the labor laws, how to run the courts, how to structure the tax code,
They change the rules.
they completely abandon the divine universal ethical laws. Instead, they elevate their own man-made, selfish, exploitative desires to the status of a deity.
I see. They worship the strict laws of physics in the engineering department, but they worship their own limitless greed in the boardroom.
Precisely. You cannot follow the unified laws of the universe to generate your wealth, and then follow your own fragmented, selfish desires for your social policy.
It just doesn't work.
You are trying to serve two completely opposed masters. You are artificially splitting reality in half. The universe is a unified, holistic system. If you use its physical tools, you must abide by its ethical rules, or the system tears itself apart.
It is like a pilot flying a commercial airliner. They use strict aerodynamics, thrust, drag, and gravity to get a 400-ton tube of metal 30,000 feet into the air. They obey the laws of physics perfectly during the climb.
Right.
But then, when it comes time to land the plane, the pilot decides they don't want to look at the instruments or follow the physics anymore. They decide to land the plane based on their personal feelings or their ego.
That's a phenomenal analogy.
The crash is an absolute mathematical inevitability because you abandon the universal laws halfway through the flight.
And the verse tells us exactly what happens to a civilization that tries to fly that way. It says, you will end up makzula, condemned and forsaken. And the source uses a highly specific, vivid, terrifying piece of ancient imagery to explain this exact word. In the vocabulary of the ancient desert Arabs, makzula paints the picture of a single sheep that is separated from the safety of the main flock and wandered off into the desolate wilderness completely alone.
Let's really analyze that image, because the mechanics of it are brilliant. Within the flock, the individual sheep has the immense collective power of the community.
Yes, protection.
Yes, the flock moves together as a unified system. It protects its weakest and youngest members, and the sheer mass of it deters predators. The wolves stay up on the ridge because the flock is operating on a collective protective ethic.
Exactly.
But the exact second that one sheep decides it wants a patch of the best grass entirely for itself, the moment it separates from the collective ethical system in favor of selfish individualism, it loses all protection. It becomes totally vulnerable.
It is immediately devoured by the wolves.
And The text is saying this is exactly what happens to massive empires and civilizations. A society that adopts this dual system, where they possess staggering scientific brilliance but operate with absolute moral bankruptcy, where hyper-individualism and greed overwrite the collective good, that society naturally wanders away from the protective framework of universal laws.
It isolates itself.
And history, the absolute wolves of time and consequence, will devour it. It will be brutally discarded by history.
You only need to look at the ruins of past empires to see the wolves at work. The text mentioned the Romans, the ancient Egyptians.
Yeah.
They mastered engineering, they mapped the stars, they conquered their environments.
They were scientifically brilliant.
But they institutionalized profound cruelty and extreme economic inequality. They created the dual system. They separated from the flock of universal ethics to hoard the grass for the elites. And where are they now?
They're gone.
They are dust. They are monuments for tourists. They are the Magzula.
It all comes together so seamlessly. Okay, let's zoom out and summarize this incredible, expansive, macro-level journey we've just been on.
It has been a lot of ground to cover.
It really has. We started by diagnosing the luxury trap, understanding how the concentration of wealth without labor breeds an exploitative elite, the Mutrafin, through extractive systems like riba.
And we saw how their selfish actions create an unstoppable momentum, Amarna, toward collapse, like a boulder rolling down a hill.
Then we learned the precise, terrifying physics of zombie. How the consequences of our economic actions aren't mystical, abstract sins, but a physical tail permanently attached to our choices, following our supply chains and our environmental decisions directly into tomorrow.
We saw the stark contrast between the short-term greed of Ajila and the sustainable, lasting vision of Akhira.
And we thoroughly debunked the profound delusion of the fatalist class, who arrogantly expect the universe to bypass its own physical laws just to reward their passive piety.
We unlocked the engine of reason, the realization that God's gifts of natural resources, Rububiyyah, are completely unrestricted.
It is an ethical level playing field where science and technology are entirely neutral tools. And only deep moral conviction, Mumin, can prevent us from using those tools for self-destruction.
We fundamentally redefined the concept of greatness, Akbar, not as military tyranny or billionaire hoarding, but as a strict meritocracy of intellect, perfectly paired with equitable distribution.
And finally, we uncovered the ultimate fatal flaw, the catastrophic danger of the dual system, the delusion that you can conquer nature with science while simultaneously conquering your fellow humans with greed without eventually being devoured as the Magzula.
A phenomenal, rigorous blueprint of human civilization.
It really is. And, we've spent this entire deep dive looking at things from the 30,000-foot macro level. We've talked about civilizations, empires, Roman tax systems, and global economies.
The big picture.
Right, but the source material doesn't actually stop there. In the very next lecture of the series, Lecture 517, the focus shifts dramatically. We move from the macro level of sweeping civilizations down to the absolute micro level of the family unit.
That is going to be a fascinating pivot.
We will be looking at Ayat 23 through 28, and we're going to examine the social security system the Quran builds from the ground up, starting with the absolute foundational ethic of how a society treats its parents and its elderly. It is going to be just as intensely paradigm-shifting as today's discussion.
I am looking forward to it. But before we go, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final, lingering question to ponder.
Go for it.
It builds directly on the mechanics we've unpacked today. We talk extensively about the physics of Zamabi, about massive systemic consequences trailing our actions perfectly, inescapably, exactly like a heavy tail.
Yeah, that visual is hard to shake.
I want you to think about our modern, interconnected global economy. Think about the way we manufacture goods, the way we consume energy, the way we distribute wealth, and the way we treat the most vulnerable laborers on the planet right now.
Okay.
If you were to turn around right this second and look closely at the tail attached to our 21st century civilization, what exactly is following us into tomorrow?
And more importantly, is it a tale we can survive when it finally catches up? That is the question we all need to be asking ourselves. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you. Keep looking for the hidden blueprints of reality. And we'll see you next time. We started today talking about X-rays of society, searching for that jagged white line of a broken system. Turns out the X-ray machine isn't broken at all. We just had to learn how to read the scans.